let me make sure I understand the question. The question was, what is my opinion of new development?
I'm asking with the redevelopment factor, 2050 is calling for a focus on redevelopment as part of it.
Okay. The problem I see with 2050 is that in that context is that 2050 has three village developments which are approved for all of Sarasota County. The rest of the county is 5-acre lots, which are, and the only way you can prepare a development is to put together the number of the 5-acre lots and under the 2050 plan. 5-acre lots were selling for $500,000 and up in Sarasota County, and that is not affordable housing. And I'm a strong supporter of affordable housing that anybody in this room can afford.
Well, I definitely support redevelopment and infill over what's going on out east, or will be going on out east, unfortunately, after October 22nd. The development community has painted a very interesting scenario for the general public, the people who aren't paying attention very well. They had the Great Recession, we all had the Great Recession, and they're pointing the finger at 2050 for the lack of development out east, for the lack of any new urbanism development out there, any villages coming up for applications. That's not the case. That's not what caused the lack of development. It was the Great Recession. And ironically, the Great Recession was caused by deregulation of the housing lending industry, by derivative on Wall Street, the very type of deregulation that now they're pushing for, in a different sense, to develop out east. So it's very ironic to me that when you look at the history of this, the community lost big time because of the Great Recession, and now we want to destroy our eastern areas for the same reasons.
The 2050 plan asks for a different kind of development. Everything that's been proposed for out east is the same cookie cutter, car dependent, Lakewood Ranch, Palmer Ranch, urbanized development that we see to the west of the urban service boundary. It works great west of the urban service boundary. It's the wrong kind of development for anything out east. As far as redevelopment, the 2050 asks for that to be a priority. Our current commissioners are ignoring the 2050. Like we said, our opponents say 2050 is great as long as you don't have to follow it. They're ignoring it. It demands infill happen first. All you have to do is drive down Bee Ridge, drive down 41, and you see redevelopment. This town is screaming for redevelopment. There is so much potential. I think we should demand that they make the city that we have walkable, livable, workable before they get to do anything in any of these villages. That's the way I feel about it.
I'm going to ask for one thing. I'm going to ask for fiscal neutrality no matter what they do. Whether they do it east of I-75 in a 75-acre development, or whether they do it in a quarter-acre infill. You calculate the cost up front, and you pay that as a down payment. And then during the project, you keep adding the machine, adding the tape up, make sure you don't miss anything, and in the end, you have a back audit, and the last penny, the last of the last penny, goes into the county coffers so the taxpayers don't have to pay anything. You won't get these two absent guys to talk about that. They won't even talk about it.
I think one of the issues we're finding in this culture as a whole, which you especially find in republicanism, that has the money to spend, is always looking for bigger, faster, shinier, better, and just build new stuff. And it has created a very wasteful society. And I think that if we, creative as we are, as Sarasotans, we need to look at redeveloping what we have. I firmly believe in reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose, because we have so many communities who need that kind of attention, who need to be looked at again. As Alex said, we need more walkable areas, we need more bikeable areas. One of the things that I'm adamant about is looking at our bikeability here in Sarasota. Right now, there's really hardly a straight shot you can take without putting yourself in great danger because we don't have bike lanes on every single road. Or we have them partially here and partially there. I think a lot of that needs to be addressed. And I think we need to look at the communities that we have. And yes, redeveloping them is a very, very necessary thing before we move forward and utilize the land that needs to be preserved for our future growth.
Thank you all for that. Tim Jackson, who was the lead planner for Gladding Jackson for the 2050 plan, and who has recently finished his term as the president of the 1,000 Friends of Florida, said during the 2050 process, neighborhoods are sacred. What does that statement mean to each of you all? And your opponents.
Well, I happen to agree with that particular thing. I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, and it was the village, and it was the village concept, and we had the village square, and there was a bandstand, and we had band concerts every Saturday night. I had a very happy childhood, and the village concept, I am not opposed to it. The village concept, as Dan Lobeck sitting back there has said, was the compromise. I was on the multi-state group, he was on the multi-state group. He and I were basically on opposite sides of the debate, whatever you want to call it. After 3.5 years, we finally decided that we were going to agree to disagree, and we all walked away from multi-state group without a solution to the problem east of the interstate. It has quite a history.
I like that question. That's interesting. I've never heard that question before in the forum. Neighborhoods are sacred. Why? And it really makes you think about what community means, what neighborhoods mean to each of us, and everyone has a different idea about what is a great neighborhood to be in, and we choose it as we come down here in Florida. We decide where to live. The eastern areas, the new urbanism plan, it seems to me we would be creating great neighborhoods. I mean, neighborhoods where you could, at 10 o'clock at night, if you're out of milk, you could say to your teenage son, you know, go walk down to the store and pick up a gallon of milk. They're not closed yet. You wouldn't have to get in a car and drive to Publix. Here's another thinking about neighborhoods. We have a developer in town who is telling people who have their particular niche in the world, the farmland people, the farm owners, to bring their farmland to him and sell it to him. He's going to put houses on all of them. Every single one of them. That's what he's put in the newspaper. So to me, you know, neighborhoods are sacred. And I think groups like CONA, the CCNA group, others, very important to our community, and we need to follow their advice as county commissioners.
You're asking an anthropologist about things being sacred, huh? Well, I do believe neighborhoods are sacred, and neighborhoods are sacred because neighborhoods embody quality of life. Each individual neighborhood is reflective of the values and the quality of life of those people who have decided to call that neighborhood home. Whether you live in a neighborhood in Newtown, whether you live in Longboat Key out on Sarasota Bay, or whether you have a rural life out east, that is your neighborhood. That is your quality of life. And you have property rights along with that quality of life. Your neighborhood embodies rights of place. And that's one thing that we really need to protect with these developers. They think that their property rights trump everybody else's property rights, and it does not, because there is an innate there's an innate thing that you have because of the place that you live, and that is the embodiment of your quality of life, and that needs to be protected.
Well, I'm going to disagree with Tim Jackson. I don't think he's ever been in some of the neighborhoods I've been in. It depends on whether or not your neighbors hold themselves sacred. If your neighborhoods think of themselves as sacred, yes, then your neighborhood will be sacred. But if your neighbors don't have any self-respect, if they're just constantly using drugs, constantly drunk out of their mind, staggering around, trying to break into your house, trying to steal your car, it depends on the neighbors more than anything else whether or not your neighborhood is sacred.
Did you say sacred or safer? Sacred. Sacred, okay. I think that any given neighborhood is going to be sacred depending on how the people living within that neighborhood recognize it as sacred. Those neighborhoods that recognize that their neighbors are actually their friends, that there is a community there, those who travel outside of their homes, hopefully on foot, to actually meet their neighbors and have those kind of connections, yes, neighborhoods can be very, very sacred. We have, unfortunately, a society that is very afraid of one another, and we don't have that same sacredness all the time. I know that in one of the last neighborhoods I was in, within the 6 months I was living there were 2 murders just down the street. Didn't make me feel very sacred right then. But in other neighborhoods I have, like living in Laurel Park right now, there's a lot of sacredness to that. It's one of the one communities I've been to in a long time where they have like 4 times a year they have gatherings and big potlucks with all the neighbors, and that is one of those things that is incredibly sacred. It needs to be cherished more often. Getting neighbors together and finding new ways for communities to interact with each other and realize their value.
Considering the long-term direction of property taxes and how they're related to our infrastructure costs and all the other costs associated with running a county, do you believe that Sarasota will ever need to go to the 10 mil max, which by law any municipality or governmental unit can only have 10 mil top tax rate? Do you think we'll need to go to that, given the way you see our development and all trending?
Long term. Okay. When I look, I've taken a good hard look at the 2050 plan, and one of the things that I see that we've had with the 2050 plan is it's been a total economic disaster for Sarasota County. We've had one development in the last 8 years, and that one development, it took 7 years to get it through the Planning Commission and approved by Sarasota County. That if that trend continues, and if the Sarasota County continues with the 2050 plan, everybody in this room is going to be faced with a tax increase every year, and that is a given. And I think that we need to sit down, take a look at it. The 2050 plan has affected not only Sarasota County, but it's affected every municipality and every city in Sarasota County, and every one of the cities in Sarasota County is looking at a tax increase.
I guess if I had to answer that question specifically, whether I think we're going to go to 10 mils at any time in the near or distant future, I'd have to say no, because my experience here since 1980, we haven't come close to doing that. We probably won't in the future, but I think if you kind of rephrase that question a little bit to say, are we going to have higher taxes? Are we going to see the ad valorem taxes going up? I think we have to. I mean, if this is the direction we're taking with this type of development, and the lack of impact fees at their actual prescribed rate, because they are artificially low because of the Great Recession, and no one seems willing to raise them up, then we're going to face higher taxes also with fiscal neutrality. I mean, that's clearly at the heart of the 2050 changes. The developers don't want to pay their fair share going forward. They want to pay a portion of it, but not everything. So where does the cost go? It goes to existing residents. It has to. And your property values will go down because you'll have all that shiny new development out there that people supposedly want in the northeast quadrant. So where will your property values go? They have to go down. So not 10 mils, but maybe 5. It's hard to predict the future.
Okay, some of you might know that I ran for Charter Review Board 2 years ago as a libertarian, and I'm running no party affiliate now to make a statement and support the opening of elections. But it's questions like this that get my libertarian blood churning. I think as far as these property tax questions, it's exactly what Ray said. We should not have the burden. They should impact fees. If these developers are going to come in here, impact fees should be paid by them, not us. It's not our responsibility. You know, they will just continue to tax us. Everybody got their tax bill. My taxes went up. Oh, the value of my house went up. And then you look out east. I've been studying the 2050 and what's going on out east for the entire 3 years of my graduate study. And this is what they do. I have a friend. Her property was worth, I'll just use figures, $400,000 last year. She got her tax bill this year. Her property's worth $1,600,000 in 1 year. They didn't raise her tax rate, did they? But they raised her property value through the roof. And do you wonder why? Because some developer wants to buy her property. So we need to just stop taxation. Anything that increases our taxes, I oppose.
I wonder if you all know what hidden taxes are. They don't raise the millage rate. They put a levy on your cell phone bill. They put a little tax on your electric. They put a lot of tax on your electric. They put a tax on your cable bill. Boy, you're not going to do without NFL and NASCAR, not if you've got a man in the house. So, will it go to 10 mils? Probably not. Will you feel like it's gone to 10 mils? Absolutely.
This question calls for probably more speculation than I can make, but I can say that I hope not. I would hope that I would assume that if we went up to that kind of rate, then that really would just knock out any kind of affordable housing we would have, that our class disparity would increase even more, and I think we need to ensure that we are making sure that people can actually not only afford to buy residences here in Sarasota, but be able to afford to keep them and participate in the government to make sure that we are paying for what needs to be paid for in a suitable manner.
I'm going to combine 2 questions here. So listen carefully, 2 and 1. But you still only get a minute.
We still have to talk about
Well, we'd like to hear it. And unfortunately, they're not here. Is the interchange mess at I-75 and University Parkway, and my name for the University Town Center is UTC, is urban traffic congestion. But that's neither here nor there. Is it a failure of planning during the development of Lakewood, development of Lakewood Ranch, the massive mall, rowing, and all of that stuff? In other words, everybody knew this was coming. How come the interchange didn't get taken into account? That's question 1. And question 2 is, if you were on the county commission, do you think you could keep the interchange at Fruitville and I-75 from following soon after and becoming the same sort of thing?
So the first question, I don't even know where to begin to say where the fault lies in that. Obviously, that was a huge huge planning blunder. Obviously, that was not seen with foresight. I considered it from the beginning that they were even creating a mall there in the first place. And so if you look at malls over the last few decades, they've consistently lost money, lost revenue. It doesn't make sense to build a mall. And what we see happening now in the downtown area with all the businesses that are now packing up in the downtown area, leaving empty stores just to go to the mall, we're seeing that we're having some issues there. I definitely would not want to see that happen again. I would not want to see that happen in Fruitville. And if I were commissioner, yes, I would make sure that I would stand in the way of that kind of development happening again and this kind of lack of planning.
Well, I think it was planned. It just wasn't planned openly. You know, what I really think is that Mr. Benderson has a no-good brother-in-law who's in the diverging diamond business. So once this was done, well, gee, yeah, we have a little problem here, but I know a way to fix it. Diverging diamond.
Well, I think if you ask those who are not here, they would probably say that university is great. It was planned so well. It's a wonderful idea. It's going to improve our economy. It's going to create all these wonderful jobs. I'm sure that's what they would say. But I disagree. I think it's a disaster, and it is an example of exactly the kind of development that will follow if we do not put different people on the county commission. That mall is mindless. Where are the solar panels to make that thing generate its own energy? Where is the covered parking with solar panels on the top? Things that are happening all over the planet, and these people can't even do the minimum. That's why I'm running for county commissioner, because it needs to stop.
I feel like just saying, yeah, Alexander's right. I think I mentioned this year before, 2036. That's where the FDOT had planned to make any changes at all to the University Parkway interchange. 2036. Is that 22 years from now? 22 years from now. But now, you know, it's desperate time. It's desperation planning. It's panic planning. How did that happen? How does the county commission allow this type of development at that heavy a trafficked intersection to go in there, and now after the fact, we're putting in the transportation that we need, the transportation improvements, the diverging diamonds, and the other two interchanges, and the north-south connectors. It's going to add up to over $100 million. Who's paying for that? You know, all of a sudden they're saying, oh, we found $100 million? Really? We were in deficit budgets at the state level just